was 2012. The first trade paperback of Saga was out, and the entire book community and comics community was talking about it, calling it The Lord of the Rings in space or Star Wars meeting Game of Thrones. Saga was written by the renowned Brian K. Vaughn, who had a long career with Marvel and DC Comics before focusing more on his original works like Y the Last Man and Ex Machina. After the ending of the latest work of Vaughn, which was at that time Ex Machina, he was very hesitant to jump into a new series for many reasons. The most crucial ones were that he wanted to have the creative freedom over his next project. He also wanted to keep the ownership of Saga and not lose it to its publisher. All of these problems were solved when his fellow writer Jay Faber recommended Image Comics as a publishing house, which offered him a contract where he can preserve the rights of Saga, but they also gave him the full creative freedom. The other issue was that he was advised by his friends not to bring a new series into a world where there's economic crisis. It almost feels like bringing a child into a world that's collapsing without a plan. But this concept became the main motive in Saga, and it became an analogy of how creating art felt like bringing a child into real life. The phenomena of a comic book series having an excellent run, receiving amazing reviews and getting a cult status, and then slowly disappearing through time is not something new. And it didn't just happen to Saga, it has happened to many other graphic novels throughout history. And the reason behind this phenomena is what I like to call the hierarchy of art forms. The hierarchy of art forms is basically that some art forms gets more recognition and a longer lifespan than other art forms. And these art forms get categorized on a hierarchy scale that is based on time, effort, and reward. To keep things simple, audiences tend to enjoy what entertains them with the least amount of effort in the least amount of time. And based on this argument, you can understand that why forms like movies and TV shows get to be on top of that hierarchy scale. The average length of a Hollywood movie is 1.5 hours to 2 hours, and you get to have a thrilling, enjoyable, incredible ride throughout the movie. Movies like Whiplash, Reservoir Dogs, Alien, and Silence of the Lambs are all less than 2 hours, and any movie fanatic will tell you these are some of the best movies ever made. You can also spend 1 more hour and you get to have a life-changing experience with movies like 2001 Space Odyssey, Godfather 1, Godfather 2, but also based on this hierarchy, literature, and yes, comic books are considered to be literature, get to be at the bottom of the hierarchy. And I'm not talking here about Marvel and DC Comics and huge IP that will be able to sell anything due to their mainstream appeal. I'm talking about the ultra successful comic series that sacrificed the mainstream appeal for much more advanced storytelling technique and more serious subject matters. And yes, sometimes a passionate individual in the industry will fight his way to adapt one of these projects, the 2016's Preacher, the 2021 Sweet Tooth, or the 2021 Y the Last Man. These projects didn't bring any attention to their source material, and they were very challenging to adapt. Even graphic novel classics such as Alan Moore's Watchmen got adapted to underwhelming results because Zack Snyder's Watchmen was, yes, faithful to the source material, but didn't quite capture the magic that Watchmen actually had. If you're enjoying the video so far, please give it a thumbs up and share with me in the comment what's your favorite graphic novel. Some adaptations even tried to stay away from the curse of the live action movies and stuck with the animation to preserve the authenticity of the comic books or the graphic novels, like Invincible and Persepolis. Yeah, that was definitely a step in the right direction, but audience still treated it like an exotic thing. And once its duration or run is over, no one talks about it and it's completely forgotten. And yes, there are some few successful examples like The Walking Dead, Sin City, and The Boys, but these are so few and far in between to justify studios to make more of these. I think the reason behind the failed attempts to transition some of these graphic novels is that the authors of the graphic novels don't actually exert effort to make them adaptable. Some even deliberately tried to make them unadaptable. Saga's creator, Brian K. Vaughn, actually said in an interview, "I wanted to do something that was way too expensive to be on TV and too dirty and grown up to be a 4-quadrant blockbuster. Maybe this lifts the ego of the graphic novel author and gives them the full creative freedom over their own work. But long-term wise, is this the right choice? The answer to this question really boils down to the creator's end goal. Do you want to stick to your niche or do you want to expand for broader audience? If your answer is expansion, then I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you'll have to sacrifice a huge portion of your creative freedom for mainstream appeal. You can't just run wild with your imagination and expect to have audience, especially if you want to attract younger audience, because let's be honest, this is where the money is at. And there's nothing really wrong with that. How can you have the headspace of creating great art when you can't even fulfill the basic needs of life? Even great artists like David Lynch refused to follow rules at the beginning of his career and ended up releasing the best debut ever, Eraserhead, one of my favorite movies of all time. But Eraserhead did not progress his career in any way and took 5 years to be made. It's not until he focused more on making mainstream, easygoing, straightforward movies like The Elephant Man and Dune, which are not some of his best movies, but that's what got him the recognition to make his movies like Blue Velvet or Mulholland Drive or Lost Highway or the rest of his filmography. Brian K. Vaughan has had his fair share of success, and that's when he felt confident to do something different with zero compromisation. Let's not forget that the drive for Vaughn to write Saga was bringing a new child into a world that's collapsing. It was his way of addressing his unstable emotions. It's no wonder that he wanted to have the full ownership of Saga and the need to keep it in its purest form. Saga is a great piece of art that will take time and effort for you to read. These are niche pieces of art, and it's meant to be that way. One day you're in a vintage manga store and you stumble upon Vagabond. The next thing you know, you're reading one of the best pieces of art ever written, and you're wondering, how the hell have I not heard of this? Will series like Saga, Hunter x Hunter, Berserk, or The King Killer Chronicle ever have a real closure? No one knows, but you have to be thankful that the next best piece of art that you will ever read is hidden in a used book pile in a second-hand store somewhere.